cut my fabric, and as I previously described, it is a total width here of 68.5 inches wide, and it is 36 inches deep. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and fold the material in half. I'm going to turn it this way. Okay, so I fold it in half, and let me put this to you so you can see it a little better. Taking my little trusty sheet and bring it right over to you. Okay, now with this in half, there's two things I'm going to do. The first thing is I'm going to get my halfway point being folded in half. I'm going to put a notch at the top or the bottom, whichever you want to call it, and the same on this side. That tells me that that's half the pattern. That's going to be very important later on. Now, knowing that this has to be 48.5 inches, finish at 48.5. Half of 48.5 is 24.25. I'm going to go ahead and put a mark at 24.25 since I'm using half of it, and I'm also going to notch it. Now from that notch right there, I need another 5 inches, and that 5 inches is for the pleating. Five inches is right here. Now at this point, I'm going to taper this all the way down to the bottom. You need to have a taper so the swag can get the swag look to it. So the bottom drops. A little hard to see using a very dark color, but I have to use a dark color on this pattern. I had done a video before and I used a white fabric, and the white fabric on the white table you could hardly see anything, so for your purpose I'm trying to use a very good contrast fabric so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. Now, how much do we want to use? This is what we have so far. How much do we want to use for each pleat? I'm going to say we're going to start with 5 inches, every 5 inches. And we're going to have 6 pleats in this. So turning it this way, I'm going to put notches in. And actually on the first one, I'm going to use 5.5 inches. Because it goes on top of the board. It won't end up being that much. This is a starting point. Another 5 inch. 5 inch. 5 inch. 5. One more 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to give this a little flare at the bottom. That'll be adjusted a little bit more later. That's what we have so far. I'm going to open this up. And here's my center point of my notches. I am going to draw a center line. Center lines are always important because if you start going crooked when you're putting your pleats in, you can look at it and you can say, oh, my line's going a little crooked, that means you're going to have to pull one way or the other, which you'll see in a minute. This board's not quite deep enough, but I'm hoping we can get away with it. Now, you're not going to have a board like this at home. Just use a pine board, it's fine. Yes, if you notice, we got a baby gate over there. That's for the dogs, so they can't come in here. We have 2 dogs. Okay, here we go. Using push pins, placing push pins up at the top. Want to make sure your top is nice and even. Push pins are in there. Let's see if I can adjust this a little bit back, a little farther. Oh, that's it. Sorry, I'm going to move you back a little. Okay. Now, starting with your first notch right here, you're going to grab that notch. You're also going to grab material right where the center of the line is, and you're going to bring it up. You want to keep this, you see this is where your notch is right here. You want to keep your material a good inch down from that for now. Because don't forget, this is going on top of a board. So you want to make sure that you have some flatness up at the top here. I'll show you that better in a minute. Now go over to my other side. You've got this material right here. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Leaving it a good inch. Now you see, that's my first pleat right there. Okay, so that's the first pleat like that. Leaving a good inch or so down from the top. It really doesn't matter at this point, but roughly around an inch, inch and a quarter is fine. Starting with the next pleat. You're going to start with the center of the of your line. Pinch it. How much to pinch? Hard to say right now, but give it a pinch. Get your hand in there. While you're holding it here, grab your next notch. This is the next notch right here. Bring it up. You'll want to keep it a little away from your other one. How much? Hard to say right now. About 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch away, and I'll show you that in a second. Go ahead and grab the other end. Bringing it up. And adjust this as you go along. Next one. Now I can already see, I only want this thing 16 inches deep. I can already tell that this first pleat right here is definitely too far down. So this is when we're going to make the adjustment right now. Unfortunately, there's no easy method to these. You just have to kind of go along and make a few pleats into it, then adjust it. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust it now. All I'm going to do is grab the material, bring it up towards the top more. Give it a pull. Then I'm going to readjust these. Does take a little trial and error here to get it right. Okay, that's the first 3 pleats. Moving on. Okay. So that's what we have so far. When you measure this, you want to measure this when it's up in the air. Let me go get a tape measure. And we want it to be 16, which is really around 17.5 inches before you do all your sewing. So you want this to be roughly around 17.5 inches. I'm 16.5, so I got to drop it down just a little bit more. But we also have to check our sides too, to make sure our sides are approximately the same. So what we're going to do is, from this tape measure, from the top of this, take a tape measure and bring it down to your bottom pleat and see what you have there. In this case, I have about 3 3/4 inches. I can come over to this side, and I have about 3.5 inches. So we have to make a couple of adjustments to keep everything about the same. Now to drop this down a little bit more, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring each pleat down just a little bit. It doesn't take much. You also want to look at your spacing and make sure your spacing is about approximately the same on each one. Again, it's more accurate if you put it up in the air. And right now it's 18. That's pretty darn close. Make a slight adjustment. While I'm here, I'm going to measure the side here. I've got about now 3.5 inches from the top of the board down. That's real close there. That's what it's looking like so far. 17.5 exactly. Which is exactly what I wanted it to be. Now the next step we have to make sure that we're allowing for enough material to cover those what I call down legs or the side returns here. So when we're wrapping this around the board, that this can staple on. So keep that in mind, that you have to have it finish approximately so when it meets around the board that you're covering the back of the board. So the down leg is 6 inches. We're going to want 7 inches. So this has to finish at the 7 inches. Right there. And we're only going to use 1/2 of this pattern because no matter how good you are, this side and that side are not going to be the same. So after we cut this out, we're going to have to look to see which is the best side. Now the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this around. If you remember, we have these great little notches right here that we put, and that was the end. From here to here was half the size of the 48.5, which is 24 1/4. And from this center to this other notch was another 24 1/4. So luckily I have these tapes here on either side of them. I apologize, you're just going to have to figure out another way for yourself. But I'm putting this notch at 71 inches. I'm keeping my board straight with my tape measure that's on here. And I'm going to go to that 71, to this 71, and I'm going to draw a line. And that's where I'm going to cut it at. And do the same thing down here. We can see that, yep. Now you can achieve the same straight edge using the square as if you had a sheetrock T or any type of a carpenter square. You can do the same thing. Keep it square to here and bring it down, and you're going to get the same thing. Just so happens I have tape measures on both sides of my table, and that's what I'm going by. Next part is to cut it out. Okay, now, you can see we've got our marks right here, and those marks were to make sure that these boards will cover right here. Okay, now you can always leave yourself a little bit more if you want. From that point, you want to taper this off and make sure you leave enough of this cuff on here, because when you sew it, you're going to lose a little bit of your pleat. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this away. This part of it, I'm probably going to recommend for you to take a magic marker and just kind of draw this out. For myself, I'm so used to doing patterns, I'm just going to trim it. I pretty much don't know where I have to be. But you'll want to probably take a magic marker and just kind of trace it out a little for yourself. You can also adjust this when you transfer this onto your fabric. So this is the pattern. just like that. And this wraps right around the down legs as you showed. So now that we've got the pattern made, now we're going to transfer it. We're going to open it up. We're going to take a look at it, see which side works better, and then cut it in half. And this is what it looks like when you open it up. And what you're going to go by are these points right here. Just by looking at it real quick, this side is not as impressive looking as this side. I can tell. This side I lose a little bit of my shaping with it. This side is more pronounced where the points are. This is the better of the side. This is the side I'm going to work with. So then what you're going to do once you figured out which side you like better. And by the way, you can test your pattern on another piece of scrap on both sides if you have to. I can kind of tell which side is better just from experience. But you may want to play with it and take one side and take a piece of scrap fabric and repleat it to see how it looks against the other half. But you never use this as a full pattern because it's never going to be right. You only want to use one half side of your pattern. Okay, so now we've made our pattern. Next step is to take our fabric and we're going to actually cut this out. I'll catch you in a few minutes.